So we are back post NaNoWriMo, which we're actually living in the past right now. So I'm going to assume we have smashed with absolute flying colours, Ben.
Absolutely. It went very quickly, I seem to recall.
You overwrote last time, didn't you?
3 novels each.
Yeah, 3 novels.
Crazy.
No. It was. I think we finished about was it 6 or 7 days or something earlier.
Yeah.
It was.
Nice,
I think it must have been
nice.
less than a week, but it was.
We might have accidentally turned it into a bit of a race, me and Ben.
Yeah.
There's a surprise.
Whoops.
I know. But this is all going to sound really strange after, like if we have fucked it up.
Yeah. If the third week of NaNoWriMo, the episode's like, listen, guys, we got a level with you. Shit's gone weird. Like, what if one of us dies during NaNoWriMo? Anyway.
I'm not sure who I'd bet on.
Me. Obviously.
Yeah, but it's never the obvious person that dies, is it? It's always somebody else gets killed off camera somewhere else.
All right, Mr. King. Right. We are obviously back here with Mark Brandon, the lovely Mark.
Hello.
And we get to ask you questions. We're going to do something special, or whatever the opposite of special is. Because
just spell it differently.
We're going to pull out the questions that we used in our very first, I think, 5 or 6 episodes.
Whoa.
Back when we'd never interviewed anyone. And amazingly, one of these has survived to the modern day. So...
Yeah, it actually has as well. But like 1 of 10.
Yeah.
Or 1 of 8 or something. It's... Yeah, we'll have to see how we go. You have to help us navigate these rocky waters, these old waters.
We'll read them out verbatim because they sound so aggy looking at them now as well. They're so aggressive.
Very aggressive. Very.
Right, I'm ready.
Okay, let's open the aggression. Mark, what are you reading right now?
Whoa, God, that was right out of the... what am I reading right now? I have about 4 or 5 books on the go. I haven't read any much recently. I've just finished the book that I recently just finished that I loved was a book called The Bullet Catcher's Daughter by Rod Duncan, which is a steampunk novel set in Leicester. And I know Rod because he's the head of creative writing at DMU, De Montfort University, and he's also a prominent member of Leicester Writers Club, of which I'm a member. And he's had about 9 novels published, and that was one that he recommended I read as an intro to his work, and it's beautifully written, really, really beautifully written, steampunk tale. So that's the one I finished recently that I most enjoyed. The other thing that I am reading again for about the millionth time, I am a huge E.F. Benson fan, and I'm reading listening to, I should say, The Complete Map and Lucia by E.F. Benson, which is set in 1930, and it's just a hilariously sort of arch middle class sort of view of middle class society in the 30s, of upper middle class. I've also got on the go, I'm just looking them here on my audio thing. Also on the go, I've got The Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. Mm-hmm. I've got a hilarious novel, which I recommend to you, definitely you, Nico, because I think you find it hilarious, by another friend of mine, James Warrad. He actually writes under J.L. Warrad, called Pennyblade, which is a fantasy novel, which is just hilarious and the audiobook is fantastic. He got a great narrator. And I've got what else have I got? Empire in Black and Gold. I started by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I'm enjoying. That's good. And I'm also looking at The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan. I started that. I'm not 100% on that yet.
Magician's Guild. I haven't thought about that book for about 15 years, 16 years. Wow, crazy. Sorry, that's really dredged up some reading at secondary school for me. That was
the PTSD.
Yeah.
PTSD.
Well, I was in Cumbria at the time, so I had hour-long bus journeys to and from school. So I got through these massive tomes very quickly. These sort of borderline YA fantasy type things really just
Well, my
just
current
disappeared.
my current work in progress, actually, I'm obviously going to sell you next year, is an epic fantasy novel, which I'm having enormous fun with, and I'm doing a lot more writing than I'm doing reading at the moment.
Yeah.
But I like listening to audiobooks, particularly in the car when I'm out walking or before bed, actually. So.
Do you find you have to change what you're reading / listening to when you're writing to sort of keep it in genre, or specifically keep it away from genre? Is that something that you have
That's
to
a
monitor?
that's a really good question, actually. I try to avoid reading in genre when I'm writing. I remember talking to a very extensively published fantasy author years and years ago, and he said, I never read fantasy novels because I don't want it to. And he said, this is going to sound really pretentious, pollute my stream. And I went, yes, that does sound really pretentious, actually. But yeah, I totally get it. And I think I'm probably fairly safe. But honestly, I just, I don't. As far as I'm concerned, my fantasy world is the one I'm concentrating on at the moment. So
Yeah.
what I'm actually re-listening to, I've got a very good friend of mine who is my sort of writing buddy, I suppose, and he's come up a few times for the weekend. And last time he came up, because I've got to the end of Act 1 of my novel now, and I read it out chapter by chapter, and we both commented on it and recorded it, so on voice memo on my iPhone, and so I'm listening to those again at the moment. So I'm listening to myself read. We edited it at the time, or rather, I edited it at the time, and he's sort of commenting and that kind of thing. And then we're talking about the plot arc and the world and all that sort of thing. And so that's what I've been kind of listening to quite a lot, actually. Well, that's kind of work.
That's fascinating. To this concept of re-listening to your novel in order to see what's working and what's not, especially with some notes from someone else on them. That sounds like an invaluable resource to me.
Well, I think what I particularly do, and part of my process is that I always read out what I've done. Almost as soon as I've written it, I'll read it out to myself and do all the voices, in order to hear what's going on. And it's a really good way of deduping. You know that thing where you have the word suitably 3 times in 3 paragraphs, and that kind of thing. And it's really difficult to pick up when you're just reading editing, but it's really easy to pick that up on audio. And I really I get a lot out of reading my own work to myself, just in terms of thinking, God, that's not working, or oh God, that's that paragraph's too long, or where's this going, or that kind of thing. And it just helps me really tighten it up as I'm going along. So
I've got to say, I'm also quite jealous of your ability to have so many books on the go at the same time. I get very hung up on like making sure that I get through the thing that I'm reading or listening to the point where if it does stall, I end up going like a week without reading anything, if that makes sense.
no, I understand that.
Which isn't great. Like I think I would prefer to be able to have 5 or 6 things on the go and just be able to dip in the same way that you might with like serialized TV shows or
no, it's like that's how I treat it. And certainly I think one of the really fantastic things that's happened is the whole streaming thing. I think it's brilliant for writers, although I don't think they've quite adapted to it yet. Because to me, I always used to hate. Well, not hate, but one gets used to watching like an episode of something every week and having to wait for it to come around on terrestrial TV. But I love binging something on Netflix. I used to say to people, it's like reading a book. I don't want to read a chapter a week. If I love the book, I want to read the whole thing all the way through, or I want to read like 3, 4, 5 chapters at once. So I think it's changed. That's changed writing, and I write. The other thing when I'm writing, I see it. I picture it really well. So I visualize what it's going to look like, and I'm doing the voices myself, and I'm thinking that. And in fact, my writing buddy and I or we actually cast my novel, sort of who's going to play this character and that character and that character. And although I haven't fully settled on it, it really helped me envisage, oh yeah, I could see them playing, one of the characters, but this particular character on screen. And so when I'm reading it, I'm thinking, oh yeah, well, how's that going to sound in their voice? Are they going to enjoy that?
Who were we, by the way? Who were Ben and I?
Yeah,
just
who
so we know.
Oh wow! Oh, you've said it now, haven't you? There's plenty of characters to go around, so you might find yourself popping up.
Is that something that you would recommend to people that are in the process of writing their novels to cast them? Do you reckon?
Personally, I think it can be useful. I think it depends on how you write. So there's a person at Club, for instance, at Leicester Writers Club, who is aphantasic, and so they can't visualize things. So they have had to develop a process for writing descriptively, which is actually really, really interesting. And they do it so well, you would never know. You'd absolutely never know that they've not pictured the whole thing in their head. I think it really depends on how you write. And I would worry with some people, perhaps, that they might start to write as if it's that particular actor in a particular role. And that's not really what for me, it's more of a visual thing rather than particularly a performance thing. But there are some people that, for instance, that I wouldn't cast as my antagonist, because my antagonist is a particular type of character. So actually thinking about who might play him, or it, probably more accurately, you have to find somebody who play evil really, really well. And as we have seen over countless movies and Netflix and Amazon things, that's not so easy. There are some people that you think, wow, they'd be really good evil. No, they really fluff it. So it's got to be a really careful piece of casting, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic. I tell you what, that's probably the deepest response to that question we've ever had. Considering it was just a rather assertive.
Well, that 5-minute response.
Yeah.
Let's just do another episode.
This one's even worse. So
okay, go on.
What is the best book you've ever read?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that one. I knew you were going to ask that.
It's such a shit question.
It is a shit question, that. I think previous of your guests, because I have listened to quite a few episodes, have said stuff like, which I totally agree with, which it sort of depends on what I've just read, and it changes from time to time. I think it's like, what's your favourite movie? And it's like, well, I guess my favourite movie is Blade Runner. I guess my favourite book, that's really difficult, because I remember I read Lord of the Rings when I was like 13, I think, and I cried when it ended. I cried for a day when it ended, because I absolutely did not want it to end. I had become completely immersed in what is actually, with my adult eyes now, quite a turgid at times novel. A lot of elven poetry going on. But I had become so totally immersed in it. And I think that's what I like to do with a book. You see, if a book immerses me, another recent book that I love, Richard Morgan's fantasy writing, The Steel Remains, Cold Commands, Dark Defiles, are the three of his fantasy books. And they are some of the best fantasy novels I've ever read, because they're just so immersive. You're so in the world, you're so with the characters, you care about what happens to them. And I guess that's what that's the way I write. I want to write so that people become immersed in what I'm writing. I don't know whether that answers the question. Lord of the Rings. I love. How about I throw out a few other books? So my biggest influence, if I'm jumping ahead, I don't know, or my favourite science fiction author, there you go, is Ian M. Banks. Sadly departed. Utterly brilliant. It almost ruined science fiction for me because it's so good. And I've actually got a story about this, because I saw him the other night, but I Twitter stalked Ian's narrator, a wonderful man called Peter Kenny, who is one of the best narrators. And when I'd heard him reading Ian Banks's books, I was just, oh my god, this adds another dimension, a ninth dimension to this fantastic eighth dimensional thinker. And Peter does such a fantastic job, and we've actually become friends. And
That's nice.
I saw him the other night for dinner actually, and we were talking about. Funnily enough, I mentioned this podcast, and he said he'd have to take a listen. And we were talking about audiobooks and books v audiobooks and that kind of thing. But Banks, I think, is my favourite author, and of his novels, consider Phlebas the first culture novel is amazing, but actually his last novel, Hydrogen Sonata, is just brilliant, given that he was suffering from gallbladder cancer at the time. And
did he know he was dying?
Yeah, and it's a really, really good, it's a really, really strong book. But all of Banks's culture novels, I would put as collectively my favourite books. I go to the back to them time and time again.
Again, that's a very thorough answer. There's quite a lot to unpack there, but I think that's you've really covered it. That the question's shit. Yes, it is. But also just how amazing it is to have like a broad, not even broad. It's more like a deep bench for great things, like great works that people have created, that you've experienced and you have inside your head. Especially when you're going to go forwards and right, I would say. But just on the Ian M. Banks thing at the end, the reason I asked whether he knew whether he was dying or not is because that must be a very different place to write from.
God, absolutely, and it comes across in the novel. It really comes across in the novel.
This is my question.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, without giving too much away, because it's a fantastic book, but it's about this ending of a civilization, effectively, because in Banks's universe, societies develop, through sort of being warp capable, and they eventually become fantastically technologically adept, so that people can live forever and this kind of thing. And eventually they get to this point where they go, we've kind of had enough as a civilization of existing, and so we do this thing that we call subliming, and these pods arrive from the sublime. Nobody knows anything about the sublime, and the entire civilization basically wills itself into whatever the sublime, the hereafter is. And but you can stay. It's not a forced thing. You can stay behind. And the book covers the subliming of the Gazilt civilization, and another great Banks names. He's fantastic at naming things. But it is about the departure from this realm into another realm, and it's just very poignant.
Did he actually use assisted suicide to end it, or?
I don't know, to be honest. Don't know.
The example for us would be of course Terry Pratchett. We have a shared love of Terry Pratchett's work, and there's an interesting thing that's happened with Terry Pratchett's final Discworld novel, which is called The Shepherd's Crown. Which is that Nick actually can't read it. He hasn't been able to read it.
I have purchased it as a book in both hardback and paperback. I've bought it as an audiobook, and I can't bring myself to do it. I've started it at least half a dozen times.
But I mean, with respect, Nico, how old are you?
32.
Right, you will do.
Yeah.
You will do.
I think I agree with you. But there is something when you have followed an author for a very long time, and you are absolutely in love with the way that they work their stories and tell, explore their world with you on their back. It is a terrible thing when they especially when they die early, they die young.
Yeah.
And when they can see it coming, it's gonna change the way that they. It almost feels like. Obviously, you haven't experienced the death, because that would be far too trite a thing to say, but you've definitely experienced what it was like on the other side of the lens from that.
I'd say it's still experiencing loss, though. We
definitely
we don't directly lose the person, because most of the time you don't know them.
No.
But that world gets closed off to you. All of a sudden, the door is shut on somewhere that you escape. I think that's a big part of why I haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, it's a bit like not being able to get back into Narnia or something, isn't it? Like you just
Yeah.
can't.
One of the fantastic things I think is that, for all that there are all these authors I love, and there are more authors I could have mentioned. Philip K. Dick, William Gibson. For all these authors that you love, there are always new authors coming along with new tales to tell, tales that are similar, told in a different way. And I think one of the joys of reading, and I know it's interesting. I do know some writers who don't really read, and I know Stephen King bangs on about this all the time about you have to read as a writer, and I think that's true. Really, I think that's, but it's not necessary. But I consider it, to be certainly true for me. And there's always new things I'm coming. It always delights me when I come across something new that I think, wow, I really. This is really captivating, but it has to be captivating. And I think part of what's happened in publishing over, the last few years is I think the commercial backdrop to publishing has become very much more apparent to everybody thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
And I think what that's resulted in is quite a lot of really formulaic stuff, and a sense that once you get to being commercially published and you're famous enough to sell, pre-sell thousands of copies of your novel, you can basically write what you like, break all the rules that you told everyone that you should follow, and actually just come out with something which is frankly a bit subpar. Whereas I think there are an awful lot of people at the other end of the scale, most of whom I think probably find their way into publishing somehow or other, who are hungrier for it and who are producing more interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous route, isn't it? When if publishers aren't taking risks, then writers won't either. And as people continue to not take risks on both sides, you do end up in that sort of stale dip.
I think we're lucky in sort of science fiction and fantasy arena, because I think there you're still getting breakouts, you're still getting really interesting. I mean, there are trends that come and go and that kind of thing. But I mean, in literary fiction, it's got to the stage now where I think it's 80% of commissioning editors in UK publishers are women of a certain age in a certain social class. Something horrific like that, and the vast majority of them are white. And so what you're getting is you're getting preponderance, because from a commercial publisher's point of view, 80% of people who buy novels are women. So you're going to produce stuff that's going to sell. Whereas in science fiction and fantasy, it's much more kind of mixed, and certainly epic fantasy, and I think quite a lot of types of science fiction. I think there are trends in those areas, but I think there are certain stuff like epic fantasy is kind of almost an eternal sell, because it seems to have this kind of continuous audience, right from people kind of my age and older, right down to sort of young people coming in. And I think that says something about the genre, that it's not somehow it stands slightly outside the kind of trends of the market. For like, oh well, nobody's doing dystopian fiction anymore, which is what I was told the other day. Oh, nobody's writing dystopian fiction anymore because they won't publish it, because it's whatever, everybody's done with that, and we're on to something else. Whereas fantasy, I think it seems to have a life of its own, and I rather like that.
That was again very eloquent, very well put. It's still an exciting time. I was almost going to mention that there was a period where a lot of the magazine culture died off, which is where a lot of short stories were being published. But that's kind of come back really now, hasn't it, with online, digital publishing. But I know that was basically the life source of many science fiction writers, at least. That's where they got their start.
But I mean, with the profusion of stuff that's being produced, I mean, obviously pay rates have gone right down, and in some cases to zero, to thanks, pat on the back, achievement, rather than I think Stephen King, when he was churning them out in the early 70s, it was actually quite a good, comparatively an incredible amount of money for stories that you just never get from anyone these days.
Yeah. Right, this next one is a bit of a nosedive in terms of.
Oh, it's contentious, isn't it, this one?
Oh, I like this. Go, go, go.
I almost don't want to say. I've been happy to not say these words for about 75 episodes. What is the worst book you've ever read?
Ooh, ooh, ooh. What a devilish little question that is.
Quite
What
a
a
lot of people
devilish
have
question.
quite rightly refused to answer that question. So
I think the worst book that I've ever read or tried to read, because I have to say that I did not finish it, I cannot imagine it got any different along the way, was a book where I massively admired what the author had done in one sense, and thought simultaneously that this had to be a kind of harbinger for the end of the human race in the other. And the book was The Da Vinci Code by Mr. Dan
there he
Brown,
is.
which was
You
just
have. That was the first time we ever asked this question. That was the answer given to it.
it's literally it's I mean, I'm so much in admiration of the guy. He has made millions writing like that in a way that had me face palming on page one. I almost had to. I nearly had to defenestrate myself at the end of the second chapter because I just thought, oh my god, what is this? What am I reading? It's hurting my eyeballs to read it, to be quite honest. But props to the guy, and like 50 Shades of Grey, props to them. They're making an absolute fortune, and I think, well, I just can't write like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can't.
Oh.
I can't, and I won't. I just
Won't. Yeah,
I just won't.
I simply won't.
Hey,
I'm sort of inspired by Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter campaign. I must admit, that's quite a little achievement that he did there.
Yeah, a bit of an odd, like you were saying, potentially authors haven't caught up with the more modern applications of digital content and stuff. I would say that's an example of someone that has pretty much is making strides in that direction. Very, very fascinating strides they are, but
you see, I have to say that for Brandon Sanderson, you see, I don't necessarily think it's an aptitude for all things digital. You have to you look on YouTube and search Brandon Sanderson, and there's just a host of videos of 4 hours of him standing at a lectern talking about writing, talking about fantasy. There's just tons and tons of stuff out there. He's written, God knows, 400 books or whatever it is. The guy has worked his socks off for years and years and years and years to get to the point where he can go, I'm going to drop 4 secret books. Does anybody want this? And people give him $41 million for it, or whatever the Kickstarter is finished at. I don't know. It was absolutely astonishing. But that's the result of the at least 10,000 hours, probably more, of becoming a total expert in what he's doing, like him or whatever. So props to the guy. Really, there's a lot of hard work.
That leads us quite nicely on to the next one, actually, which I'm going to ask. Actually, it's
I'm loving this.
It's a bit of an odd one, and it's one that I would actually like to try and break with form here and break out into 2 different questions. So we'll see what happens. It's who is your favourite literary character? And now, every time we asked past tense this to someone, they would be like, could you clarify that? What do you mean by that? So I reckon you can go 2 ways with it. Either, what's your favourite character from fiction, or do you have like a favourite story about an actual writer, as in a literary character rather than a literary character?
It's a really interesting question. I haven't really. I suppose. I mean, I was reflecting on a little bit while we were talking about the favorite book question, and for years and years and years, if anybody said to me what's your favorite book, I would say 1984, and I've read it a ton of times, and I think one of the best characters in literary fiction is Winston Smith. I think, Orwell was such a phenomenal writer, quite simple in style, certainly economical, and I think he managed to build, one of the most compelling figures in world literary history in what is actually quite a short book, absolutely brilliantly. So, in terms of admirable characters, I would say that. Yeah.
Very good. And then, do you have any interesting anecdotes that you've taken to heart about famous writers? You see, for a big chunk of the last season that we were doing what we called write-like episodes, which is where we took infamous or famous authors and tried to write in their style or try and ape them in some way, or simply deal with their subject matter. It was rather amusing which ones worked and which ones didn't, wasn't it, Nick?
Oh yeah.
For example, the Tom Clancy one, it was like I'd been dragged into a room and beaten with a lead pipe until I wrote something, because I did not enjoy that process.
Right. Okay. Which were the ones that worked best, and which were the ones that didn't work?
Good question.
Roald Dahl worked. I think we both had a really good time with Roald Dahl.
We did both have a very good time with Roald Dahl. Yes. I very much liked. Oh God, it's gone out of my head. I've forgotten what the prompt was. Sorry, but it was the. I'm gonna have to look it up. Sorry.
So if you remember the author, Hemingway was a good one actually.
Hemingway was a fantastic one. I think we both engaged with it. Fantastic in the sense that we had a good time. We didn't both successfully write like Hemingway, but I particularly enjoyed trying to get his subtextual conversation thing working. That was very good.
I tell you who I was terrible at, Jane Austen.
I love her. I love her writing. Oh my God. It's really difficult to write like Jane Austen. Really difficult. She is a massively underappreciated, I think, certainly by my kind of contemporaries, and by, I think people who read literary fiction know, and certainly anyone who's studied English literature knows how good Jane Austen is. I happen to know there's a friend of mine who is, I suspect, probably, if not the top, then certainly one of the top Jane Austen fans in the entire world. Every country that he goes to, he buys a copy of Pride and Prejudice in the language. So he's got 60 copies of Pride and Prejudice in all different languages. He's got first editions of her work. He's got all these absolutely amazing things. He can basically sit and recite, and does, whole chunks of Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Sensibility. Was that Jane Austen? I can't remember. Probably not. He is an absolutely huge Jane Austen fan. And I'd read, when I first came out of university, I actually subscribed to a monthly book club called Quality Paperbacks Direct. Because whilst I'd done a literature, part of my degree at university I did French, and part of that was literature. So I'd done the whole lit crit thing. But I hadn't really read much English language, apart from a few books at school on the O-level syllabus. Mystifyingly, I didn't do A-level English. I have no idea why, because I got an A at O-level. But anyway. But I realised I hadn't really read all of the books that you were supposed to have read, all the kind of great literary authors. So I joined Quality Paperbacks Direct, and they would do, it was quite a good club, actually. So to begin with, you paid a really small amount of money, like, I don't know, 10 quid, and you got 11 paperback books. And they just sent me this box of books, and they were all proper contemporary, Martin Amis and Salman Rushdie and all that sort of thing. And so I started reading literary fiction. I did this for about 2 years, and they'd send you a leaflet every month, and you had to pick one book, I think, every month, but you'd end up picking 2 or 3, because there were just offers and 2-for-1s and that kind of thing. So I ended up reading quite a lot, and started reading Jane Austen, and I just really, didn't really get into it. And then, as I say, years later, this friend of mine said, "Oh, you must read Austen again." And this is when I'd started to really write seriously. And I just remember starting to read Pride and Prejudice, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is this is amazing!" I really remember ringing him and going, "She's amazing," and he went, "I was telling you this, you know." And she writes with such incredible economy. There is nothing, there's no fat in those novels at all, and it's a remarkable achievement. And I love the audiobooks. I've got particularly the audiobook of Emma. I think it's Susanna Harker that reads it, and it was just fantastic.
What did you make of the most recent adaptation of Emma? I know a lot of people.
I sort of started to watch it, and I was like, I mean, I love Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
But I thought she was amazing in Queen's Gambit, just fantastic. And in fact, actually, she would play my heroine in my fantasy novel beautifully. So that's, in fact, we've landed on exactly the person we cast to play my protagonist, my female protagonist. But I just, I didn't really like it. I think there are better ones. I think the BBC one, the yonks ago, was better. But you see, I really didn't like Bridgerton either. I tend to like my period rather than all sort of jazzed up for the TikTok generation. And I just like, whilst I kind of admired their attempt to sort of inject diversity into it, and I thought it was quite interesting from that perspective. It just felt really unnecessarily showy to me, and I just didn't care for it really.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, by the way, just if anyone's still wondering what I was trying to remember, it was the Rudyard Kipling episode. The prompt was elephant. But anyway, it was a good one. Anyway, onwards and upwards. Go on, I'll give you back the question asking, Nico.
I'll take the mic.
That's right.
So, when did you last laugh while reading?
Oh, well, that is such a good question. These are pretty good questions for saying you've dug them up out of the sort of Valley of the Kings or whatever. I tell you, I laugh because I as I say, I'm re-listening to E.F. Benson's Complete Map and Lucia at the moment, and it tends to be on my bedtime listening because when I'm falling asleep, which I do in about 5 seconds actually, but I like to listen to something, but I can't listen to something that I haven't heard before because my brain keeps going, "Oh, this is interesting. What happens next?" Whereas I've listened to that like 3 or 4 times, and it is so funny. He's such a funny writer. And if anybody hasn't read Map and Lucia, and they've done a couple of TV adaptations of it, the one starring the first one was starring Geraldine McEwen and Prunella Scales, which is just absolutely brilliant. Oh, wow. And it's just basically Map and Lucia is basically this kind of upper middle class bitch fest between these two women in this tiny Sussex village, and it's their kind of fight for dominance, but in the most subtle and devious ways. And he's just a funny writer, and there are bits in Map and Lucia where I laugh out loud. That's because his use of language is just so subtle. It's so funny. It's so, all this deviousness, all this scheming, and brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So that was the last time I laughed. So probably last night.
If we're going to turn that mask the other way around to see the tragedy side, when did you last cry whilst reading?
Well, aside from me crying my eyes out after I finished Lord of the Rings when I was 13, I don't find much book-wise makes me cry, to be quite honest. I don't know why that is. I tell you what, I do cry at movies and some TV series, and I have there's some reliable movie. If I need a good cry, which I occasionally do, there are some movies that I put on and I know I will blub not all the way through, but at particular points. So reliable blubbing movies, and funnily enough, they tend to be animated. So I love animation. I love
Studio Ghibli,
animation.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, but actually, the Studio Ghibli ones, they don't make me cry. But Disney always has not Disney necessarily. Pixar has a particular effect on me. So the first 20 minutes of Up, for instance, I defy anybody not to cry at that point, because I went to see it at the movies and the whole cinema was crying. You could just hear people sniffing. crying.
Yeah, that would actually be a fairly good psycho test, wouldn't it? If you just play it up to someone and then just watch them.
Watch them. Didn't move me. Get
gonna
this man
say-
out. Make
Get
this
the
man
fuck
prime
out of my
minister
house.
immediately.
Yes.
This one guy just laughing. What do you do about him?
I mean, the other one that really gets me is, and it really, really gets me. And I remember I watched it first on the plane back from New York after I sort of split up with my partner, or I knew I was going to split up with my partner, and I watched Brave, and I had to go to the toilet and I cried for about 20 minutes, and until this woman was knocking and going, "You gonna be in there much longer? Oh my God, you've been in there for ages. There's another toilet woman." But Brave always gets me, and it's always the relationship between Merida and her mother, and because my mum is very, very special to me, and an amazing woman, amazing woman, and
That's lovely.
Brave always makes me think, and she's Scottish as well, and it makes me think about a mother's love for her children, and I can feel myself like go on to another question. I can feel myself
move on.
now.
I'll tell you what it is for me. It's Gandalf going down to the Balrog. That gets me actually most times. 9 times out of 10.
I did have a tear in my eye at that, actually.
Yeah, it's just particularly well shot, and it's a big moment.
I like Boromir dying as well. That got me.
Boromir's very big. Yeah.
That doesn't make me cry. That makes me erect. His last stand is incredible. It is.
Don't we move on from this? I'm gonna.
I thought you were siding with the orc. When you said it made you erect, I thought you were siding with the orcs for a moment. You were like, "Yeah, let's really got him."
I'm 90% Uruk. Did you not know this? I was actually going to say
wrecked. You said, "Oh my God, I thought you said wrecked."
No, he said erect.
Erect. Oh lordy! Wow. Okay.
I was trying to change the move.
Fine. Well, no, I can kind of see. I can sort of see that because Sean Bean is kind of hot, really.
He's a baby.
And yeah, I kind of see that. I sort of know that I'm not going to even think about that.
It's actually when we first start, we asked each other these questions in the first episode, and we've ended up on this mum's thing. And the last time I'd cried, it was really completely non-sad fantasy novel, but it's because we just had the all clear for my mum. But Ben completely changed what the last thing was. I was visiting him, and he got me drunk, and then he handed me, I don't even know which Pratchett book it was, but it had a really beautifully written foreword by Tony Robinson.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Talking about the, what it was like to know Terry and what a nice man he was. And just in the middle of an evening of drinking and merriment, Ben was like, "Here, weep." And just left me to be sad for a bit on my own.
You need to have like peaks and troughs in your evening, my friend.
He's a bastard.
Otherwise it's just
come around, read this introduction of blub.
Yeah, nobody wants all fun all the time, Nico.
Also makes
they listen to this podcast.
Yeah, move on.
Nice.
Okay, right. This is the only question we've ever had that's had to have a language caveat. So
It's had feedback.
Shocking.
So, tell us one really disinteresting or uninteresting fact about yourself.
One uninteresting or
Disinteresting.
off-putting fact about myself. One uninteresting fact about myself. God, there's so many. Where would I even start?
Please note I will argue with you on this if I say it's too interesting.
Okay, what's really...
As is tradition.
I'm trying to think of something really... I really quite enjoy going around B&Q.
Now,
Right.
is this sort of a
too interesting
proximity? No. Oh, we might be. We're going to get there. Is it a geographical proximity thing? Sort of, you've got a B&Q nearby, or do you sort of aim? Do you know what? Nothing on.
I'll also say that we need to clarify that B&Q is like a hardware store for our American and non.
So Home Depot or such like. No, I actually think it's kind of because I've done a little bit of DIY here and there. I used to live the last 2 years prior to. I moved to Leicester 6 months ago, and the 2 years prior, I was living in Scotland in a small, in a little cottage in the middle of nowhere, and I decorated and sort of refurbed that, to an extent by myself. So I quite enjoyed. And my ex helped me put a new roof on the garage. So, or rather, he did most of the work, and I just kind of made tea and handed him kind of like screwdriver. Yeah, fine, that kind of thing. Yeah, I kind of quite enjoy sort of going around B&Q, see what they've got, and kind of thinking, do I need a hammer driver? Do I need this? Do I need that? And I kind of, luckily I can't afford it at the moment, so I haven't bought any DIY tools in a while.
Whenever I'm
Is
in
that
somewhere
uninteresting
like that,
enough?
oh,
I think it's getting there.
verging. I spend whenever I'm there, I tend to pick things up that I would normally have no interest in. I go,
Yeah.
oh, look at that! It's shears, but the back of them also work as a windscreen wiper. No, that's good. That's good. I don't have a car or a hedge, but I can really understand the benefit of. And when I leave, there is no way on
That
earth
says
I would
Dragon's
go
Den to me,
online.
Nico. It says Dragon's Den to me.
I'll be honest with you, I'm out.
I think I basically only ever go into B&Q to go and get like barbecue fuel. And that's the only time that I go in.
I think just I'm reaching out to B&Q. I might at them on this because they really should sponsor this episode, shouldn't they? Because we've talked about B&Q so much.
Yeah.
Let's ruin it, bunch of
They're
fucking
low
wankers.
prices. Oh,
No,
fantastic!
love them really.
That was very well answered, because sometimes people do not give uninteresting facts about themselves, and we are forced to reckon with that. But that was
probably there are other uninteresting facts, but
Right. And now the sole survivor from the dark days. If you could adapt a book into another medium, what would it be? To which medium, and why?
that is too easy, that one. I would adapt any of the Ian M. Banks culture novels to Netflix. I would actually start with the first one, Consider Phoebus, because it is so based around characters going from one insanely amazing set piece to the next. I mean, it would cost an absolute fortune because it would be the CGI would have to be so lush and so enormous of scale. It would cost a fortune, and obviously, we'd have to have the best. It's a kind of ensemble piece, so you'd have to have lots of really good character actors in it as well.
Yeah.
But it will be totally worth it. And if Jeff Bezos is listening and wants to make something better than Rings of Power, then Ian M. Banks, Consider Phoebus. Jeff, you've got to do it because it's just epic.
I think that sounds like a much better use of the money. Even if they only used half the budget, I'm sure it would still be better. I'm really struggling with Rings of Power. I've tried multiple times, and I'm just finding it very dull. Yeah, no, it's dull.
It's also really cliche. I mean, the start of the first episode, it's like some horrid, no spoilers, but horrid little children, elven children, smashing a perfectly beautiful origami boat with a rock and going, ugh, because immortal beings are twats too. And you're just like, oh God, is this gonna be like High School Musical Rivendell or what? Really? It's like
it does.
I kind of half expected that, and it just really
it does kind of go there a little bit. People getting kicked off the swim team or whatever. It does happen.
Oh well, it's American obsession. They're obsessed with the Wild West for some reason I still can't fathom. They're obsessed with high school. Anything that's going on in high school. High school is a formative time. High school is the making of you. High school is, oh God knows. I mean, it's just endless. And every time we try to do it over here, it's quite hilarious, I think. And when you look at that, endless Doctor Who episodes where, it's set for some reason in a comprehensive school where the headmaster's a monster or whatever. And it's just all these completely horrible little RADA creatures coming up and going, oh no, the headmaster is a monster. Am I acting hard enough, mummy? And it's just like, oh God, save me, please.
Horrible little RADA creatures. Fantastic.
You're worse, darling. They could be from East 15.
Oh, bloody hell. Well, I hope it gets made, mate. I hope it gets made.
Jeff's got the cash. Jeff, you would be making a serious amount of money because and I have to say to any science fiction fans out there who haven't read Consider Phoebus, It is just bloody fantastic.
And also, not to continue to push the point on you, Jeff, but you did make The Expanse, and then you canned it. So,
Let's get started on that. I tell you what, Jeff, I have got an epic fantasy novel which will hopefully come out next year, which will look absolutely enormous on Amazon and will be so pant-wettingly good that you're going to want to go for it.
The thing is, we know that he's listening because we get listener metrics, and we have one from space, so it must be him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So give us your cash, you bull.
Either that, or if there's a GSV, that's General Systems Vehicle, in orbit now, listening to this podcast, please, 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 just take me away. Take me away to the culture. I want to join the culture.
Lovely. Right, we're on to the U bit.
Ooh.
Where should people start reading your work? What's the thing that they should read first?
Well, there's only one thing that's out there at the moment, which is my book of short stories, Colossus of the Thames and Other Tales, which is available, as I say, on Amazon and in paperback and ebook and other e-retailers. Colossus is, I guess it's a good way to get a flavour of me because it very much showcases my writing. It is... because it's set in a kind of alternate Victorian timeline, and I wanted to make it very realistic. I paid quite a lot of attention to the language and some of the descriptions. So there are some quite unusual words in there, and some quite arcane words. And it's funny that there was a posted something on Facebook the other day, and one of my friends said, "Oh, I bought Colossus and I'm taking it on holiday with me to read." And another of my friends chimed in and went, "It's great, but take a dictionary." I was like, yeah, okay, well, yeah. I mean, whereas, funnily enough, somebody else then posted and said, "I like learning new words." But I have to say that I'm slightly rowing back from that in my other thing. There's also another thing of my work on Amazon, actually, an ebook, a short ebook called Inkerman, which is set in my sort of steampunk Crimean War, and it's sort of about AI, I suppose. The unfortunate thing about it, and it came out, I published it literally a month after Colossus, so it came out last April. Of course, this was all before Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
Of course.
And people have said to me, maybe you should take your Ukraine story down. But it's got virtually nothing to do with Ukraine. It just happens to be set in the only sort of prominent war from a steampunk perspective in the latter half of the 19th century. That's really the only...
I mean, it sounds like you've got some good people around you, but at the same time, like, until a Ukrainian person tells you that they don't want it to be out there, then it's really...
So that's a good example of my... So I suppose that's a good example of my writing. So that's up on Amazon. So that's probably a place to start.
They can also go to your website as well, can't they? Which is
indeed, yes. Which is typhon-creative.com. Yeah.
Perfect. And then following you online, where can they hear your thoughts? Is it mainly Twitter?
I am on Twitter, and that's at authorbear2, B-E-A-R, author B-E-A-R, authorbear2. I don't know who authorbear1 is. I think I meant to hunt him down. Anyway, and I'm on Instagram as Mark R. Brandon Official, but I don't really use Instagram that much, to be honest. I'm not massively convinced about the benefit of author Instagram, but
well, people should definitely go to your website to check out the covers as well, because the covers are fantastic, aren't they?
Covers, actually, yeah. I mean, the covers are by an artist called Pete Katsounis, and he is on Instagram at Nutkin, Nutkin, and he's a graphic novelist. In fact, he's in a fantastic graphic novel of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which is available on Amazon, which is a really lovely production. It's a kind of string-bound hardback. And Pete is incredibly talented and had a little steampunk phase, so that's who I contacted for my steampunk covers.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Mark. That was
you've been tremendous.
Absolutely,
I've really enjoyed it. I've really, really enjoyed it.
I feel like it wouldn't have mattered what we asked you. We were always going to get an interesting conversation.
We could just go on, and I mean, if you want to give me another episode, then just hit me up. We could talk about anything. I can talk about writing forever.
Listen, sweetheart, you finish up that fantasy book, I'll have you back anytime.
We're definitely planning to hit the cons next year, so we'd be happy to lift a pint with you and chat about stuff.
Excellent. That'd be great. I'm definitely going to Easter cons, or what's it called? Conversation, isn't it? I think it's called.
Is it? We need to look into it all for ourselves, but yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you again, Mark, and
brilliant. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?